The old coastal road, Route 73, was less a road and more a suggestion. A serpentine scar of cracked asphalt hugging the sheer cliffs of the outer reach, perpetually chewed at by the sea. They'd hired me, a contract surveyor, to assess its inevitable collapse. Isolation was the job's biggest perk, a solitude only truly possible when the nearest human soul was miles away and the only conversation was the relentless crash of waves against ancient stone. My small, beat-up pickup truck was my office, my tent my home, pitched just far enough back from the cliff's edge to feel safe, but close enough to let the raw and tamed wind off the Atlantic sing me to sleep. For the first week, it was glorious. Just me, my equipment, and the vast, indifferent beauty of the coast. I charted erosion, marked unstable sections, and savored the quiet. But then, the quiet started to change. It began with subtle things, sounds I couldn't quite place. My instruments, usually reliable, started acting peculiar. My GPS would frequently lose signal, even on clear days. My inclinometer, designed to measure slopes, would sometimes register impossible shifts, tiny, fleeting tremors that my body couldn't feel. I chalked it up to the salt air corroding the ancient electronics, or perhaps the sheer instability of the ground I was working on. Then came the smell. It was faint at first, carried on the sea breeze. A sharp, metallic tang, like rust mixed with something else, something glandular and deeply unpleasant. I dismissed it as dead fish, or perhaps a whale carcass washed up further down the coast. But it lingered, especially near the deepest, most shadowed crevices of the cliff face, places the sun rarely touched. And it felt wrong, a smell that hinted at something not quite natural, something profoundly unclean. The sounds grew more distinct, not just the ocean, but something beneath it or within it. A low, resonant thrumming, felt more than heard, that vibrated through the rock beneath my boots. And then the scraping, a high-pitched, chitinous drag that seemed to follow the shoreline, always just out of sight, always when the fog rolled in thick and heavy. I'd be taking measurements, lost in my data, and then it would come, a sound like enormous fingernails raking across wet slate. I'd freeze, my heart hammering, straining to hear it again, but it would vanish, swallowed by the wind and the waves. I told myself it was debris, the sea pulling at the rocks, but the pattern was too deliberate, too rhythmic. It was moving, not merely eroding. One evening, as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violent purples and oranges, I saw it, or part of it. I was packing up my gear, my back to the cliff, when a sudden movement caught my eye. High above, silhouetted against the dying light, a section of the cliff seemed to shift. Not a landslide, but an elongation, a dark, cemented form that stretched upwards for an impossible height, then contracted. It was too quick, too strange to fully process. My mind tried to rationalize it, a trick of light, a displaced boulder, an optical illusion caused by exhaustion. But the image burned itself into my retinas, a limb, slender and segmented like an insect's, but vast, reaching. My blood ran cold. I bolted to my truck, fumbling with the keys, driving away from that spot faster than I'd ever intended to. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every night, the scraping sound was closer, more insistent. It seemed to emanate from the base of the cliffs, just below where I'd pitched my tent. I'd lie awake, clutching the rusty tire iron I'd dug out from under my seat, listening to the rhythmic drag, imagining what immense thing could make such a noise. The metallic scent was overpowering now, filling the air, even inside my tent. One night, I heard a new sound, a soft, squelching wetness, like something heavy being pulled across soaked sand. I peered through the mesh of my tent flap. The moon was a sliver, casting long, distorted shadows. I saw nothing, but the ground just outside my tent, where the soft earth met the rough gravel, was disturbed. A fresh, slick trail, like something had been dragged, and it led directly to my tent peg. Panic, cold and sharp, finally set in. This wasn't a trick of the mind. Something was out there. Something enormous, something hungry. I packed my gear in a frenzy, throwing my equipment haphazardly into the truck bed, my hands shaking. I abandoned the tent, the sleeping bag, everything that wasn't essential. As I peeled out, gravel spitting from my tires, a grotesque tableau greeted me. On the cliff face, perhaps 50 feet down from where I'd been working that day, was a series of fresh gashes. Deep, wide gouges in the ancient rock several feet long, as if a colossal claw had raked through it, and embedded within one of the fissures, glinting wetly in my headlights, was a shard. It was long, curved, and obsidian black, with serrated edges, like a broken tooth, or a piece of some unimaginable alien exoskeleton. It reeked of that metallic, glandular stink. I drove for what felt like hours, the shard clutched in my trembling hand. The image of those gashes burned into my mind. I passed the road-closed barrier I'd put up, not even bothering to stop and move it. I just kept going, my truck rattling over the uneven surface, the distant roar of the ocean a mocking reminder of what I had left behind. The dawn broke, weak and grey, as I finally reached the nearest town, a sleepy fishing village called Port Eldred. I stumbled into the first diner I saw, ordered coffee I couldn't drink, and tried to explain to the bewildered waitress what I'd seen. She just nodded slowly, her eyes wide, then pointed to the local newspaper tacked to the wall. The headline read, "Mystery Disappearances Continue Along Outer Reach Coastline." Below it, a grainy photo of a missing hiker. Missing for months, they said, many missing over the years. No bodies, no signs, just gone. I showed the waitress the shard. She gasped, dropping her rag. An old man at the counter, hunched over his eggs, slowly turned. His eyes, clouded with age, fixed on the black splinter. "That's from the deep," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "They call it the scraper. Comes up when the moon is thin, when the land's soft. Pulls things down into the cold. Always has." He shook his head, a look of ancient, weary dread on his face. "You were lucky, son. Most don't get away once it takes a liking." I booked the cheapest motel room I could find, locked the door with a chair wedged beneath the handle, and tried to sleep. But every time my eyes closed, I heard it again, the metallic scrape, the squelching drag, the terrible, resonant thrumming. I knew I'd never be able to work on any coast again. The ocean, once my solace, was now a bottomless, hungry maw, and I had merely glimpsed one of its teeth. And I knew, with chilling certainty, that it hadn't just taken a liking. It had remembered me. Thank you for listening. If this story found you in the dark, subscribe and turn on notifications. A new tale waits every night.